All right, so for this month's weekend challenge, we have Fantasy Excel Revised. Now, Fantasy Excel was a really fun case by Peter Scharl back when we played it as part of the Microsoft Excel World Championship. And I'm really happy to see the case device design team with Peter, Leo Fernandez, Chris McNeil, and David Brown adapted it for the MECC circuit. So how are we going to solve this case? Well, let's find out. Level 1, for each given code, provide the requested category amount as a number. Now you see this part is underlined, and that's going to be very key as you see how I'm going to solve this case. So the categories we're looking at are these 4 categories there. Let me bring these down as headers to this level, just like that. And you see what we have in this level is that each code has a certain format, has certain information in it. We have the week number, we have the levels completed, we have the total game score, always in 3 characters, and we have the bonus questions. So the code, if we parse it out, we break it all down, we see all the important information that we need for this case. So what I'm going to do is I am going to split this information out column by column, section by section, so we can use that for analysis. Now there's 2 ways to do that. Well, there's many ways, I'm sure, but 2 ways you can really focus on are based off of the mid function. You could first just write 4 mid functions to pull out all the information, and that works perfectly well. But mid functions also work with arrays, so I can use just one single mid function to pull out the information that I need. So we're going to pull out information from this code, and I'm going to pull out the 4 parts. Now they start in 4 different positions within that code. They start in position 1, position 2, position 3, and then because that position 3 is 3 characters long, the last one starts in position 6, just like that. And then for the number of characters that we're going to pull out, well, we see here that the week number is always 1 character, levels completed is always 1 character, game score is always 3 characters, and the bonus questions is always 1 character, right? So I'm going to write my mid statement just like this, and what's going to happen is that it's going to pull out this information in 4 separate cells, going through the 4 parts of each array separately. Now, right now, Excel has this listed as text because anytime you use the mid function, whatever comes out is going to come out as a string. But the question specifically says we need to answer it as a number. Now, fortunately, there's a very easy way to do this. Excel knows that whenever you do math with something that looks like a number, it's probably a number. So I'm just going to multiply these by 1, and you see that the alignment moved over to the right, which is a visual cue for us saying that this is now treated as a number rather than as a string. So in level 1, we want the bonus questions value, right? So I'm going to XLOOKUP this bonus questions category from these 4 headers right there, and then return the corresponding value that I just pulled out right next to that cell, just like that. So we saw that this code refers to getting 1 of the bonus questions right. I'm going to fill that down to apply to the rest of the questions, fill this down to solve the rest of level 1, and that is how you get the answer there. Level 2, what is the sum of the total game store amounts across all weeks for the given player? Remember, player codes are in the weekly details tab, and total game scores in the CCC information in the code, where the format is ABCCCD. So this is a tab, let me zoom in a little bit. This is the tab that we are working with, and I'm going to take what we just did with level 1 and apply it to this sheet. So let me move these over a little bit so I get some space here. This is going to be my columns that I just created. And let's do the same formula that I did here and apply it there. I think the only thing I might have to change is the cell that it's referencing. Yeah, we're going to reference that cell instead. So now we've got that applied to all of the information. Let's go ahead and turn this into a table. It's going to make referencing a little bit easier. Yep. Oh, yeah, because those are range references. Okay, copy, paste values. Now let's turn it into a nice big table. There we go. And this is, those column names didn't come over, because these have to be text. They can't be formulas, they can't be ranges, they can't be anything like that. So there you go. There's all the information within our table. So let's call this table results. There we go. So we want to find all the scores for this player. So what we're going to do is we are going to SUMIFS results score, right? Total game score, where results player equals the player listed there. So we get 4,306 points for that player, and all of the rest of them come in very nicely. Level 3, how many fantasy points did the given player score in the given week number? Fantasy points are calculated by multiplying the number of levels completed by 250, total game score by 5, number of bonus questions by 500. Right, so let's go ahead and add this as another table in here. We'll call this fantasy score. And to figure out the fantasy score, we are going to take the levels completed, multiply that by the 250 here, plus the total game score, multiply that by the 5 there, plus the number of bonus questions, multiply that by 500 there. We're going to get the fantasy score for each player. So we need to know the fantasy score for that player and that week. Well, there's a nice little trick we could do with XLOOKUP, which is we're going to concatenate the lookup and the columns that we're going to look this up in. So we're going to look up Tegan Parkin and the week number there. So really what Excel sees is Tegan Parkin 6, right? We're going to look that up into this table. So we're going to look at player and week number. So basically think about an imaginary column where the player and week number values are all combined together. And because the question is asking for fantasy points, we are going to return from the fantasy score column there. So you see Tegan gets 3,480 points. I fill that in. The rest of them all check out. Level 4, how many players are on the given school or fantasy team? Now this one is fun because this is all in this player's details tab. Let me zoom that in for you. Yeah, let's go ahead and turn this into a table as well. We will call this team. And basically what we want to do is if we're looking up the school, we want to see how many times this shows up in the school list. If we're looking up at the team, we want to see how many times this shows up in the team list. So if this is school, count if from the school here, how many times this name pops up. If not, then it must be the fantasy team. So we are going to count if from that fantasy team, how many times this name pops up there. Now that simple OR statement should handle all of the cases for this level. So we get 1 for the school there, paste that down, fill it across, we get all of the answers there. So that OR is letting us check which column we're going to look at. Level 5, the two teams play against each other in the given week number. What is the difference in the number of fantasy points between the winning team and the losing team? Right, now, one thing to keep in mind here is that, let's see the example. Week number 2, combined Central Florida and Technology Sydney team had 6 players. The team's top 3 players scored 6,520, 5,790, blah, 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 for a total of 18,000 points. Now, the key thing is here, and it mentioned it up in the instructions in here, that when we're considering team scoring, we're only considering the top 3 fantasy points in the week. So let's take this step by step. And first, let's find out what were the top 3 points from the combined Central Florida and Technology Sydney team in week 2. We'll do the same thing for worldwide team map, and then we'll do the comparison, right? So to do this, I'm going to use a filter function. Let's filter these fantasy scores. Ooh, actually, you know what? Before I do that, I just realized that we're working with 2 separate tables here. It's going to be easier if we just work with one table. So let's add these 2 columns into this table here. And then this will be very easy. We can look up the player name in this table, return his school. Do the same thing for the fantasy team. Look up this name from here and look up the team. So now what we got is we got all of our information in one nice big table. That's going to make it much easier to work with. So again, let's go back to combined Central Florida and Technology Sydney, right? So let's do a filter function for this. We're going to filter these fantasy scores where the team name equals the team name given there. And there's actually 2 conditions because we got to consider the week number, right? So to do this, I'm going to multiply by where the week number equals the week number listed in I-206. Now, the reason why I did multiply is you think of Excel thinks of trues and falses as 1s and 0s. If you multiply them together, both things have to be true or equal to 1 in order to return a 1. If either of them are 0, that's not going to count, and it's not going to be in our filtered list. So here's the scores that we get from this team in this week. We want the top 3, right? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sort them in descending order. So highest score on top, lowest score on bottom. I am then going to take the top 3 scores from this list, which should match the top 3 scores in the example. They do. And then I'm going to go ahead and sum these all together. So that is the Team 1 score. And then to make it easy, let me just take a quick look. And I'm going to do a little bit of locking here. I'm going to lock the week number. So that way, when I copy and paste over here, so Team 2 score, copy, paste, I get that Team 2 score. And because the question is looking for what is the difference in the number of fantasy points, we could take the absolute difference from these 2 scores, and that will tell us what the difference in points are. So let's go ahead and apply this to the rest of the games. Oops, missed one. That's how you solve level 5. Level 6, how many fantasy points did the given team score for the given week numbers? Right, so we're given a team here and we're given 3 week numbers that we are looking at. So this one is actually, fortunately, not too hard. So let's take this and we're going to split the numbers out. So we're going to text split, not split text. Text split this based on the comma. And what you remember from level 1 is the same thing applies here. Excel sees this as strings. You see the numbers are shifted to the left. Let's turn these into numbers. I actually don't know if that's actually necessary, but it's good practice, right? And then I'm going to take the same formula and I'm going to move it down here and I'm going to make just a few small changes. Number 1, the team is going to stay here and it's going to stay in column G. So we're not going to adjust that. Let's go ahead and lock that in there. Second, the week number is going to be right there, and that is going to just because I'm going to plan to copy and paste over to the right. So the rest of the formula should be the same. So we see in week 9, we got 19,680 points, which matches there. Copy and paste that over, 17,065, 18,060. That's exactly what we are looking for. Let's take the sum of those 3 scores together, and that is how we are going to solve this level. Copy that, paste it down. There you go. Level 7, the 2 teams play against each other across the 4 given week numbers. Which team scores the most points across the 4 weeks, Team 1 or Team 2? And what is the difference in the number of fantasy points between the 2 teams? All right, great. So we're doing the same thing as we're doing here, except now we got 4 weeks, and now we got 2 teams to compare. So let me go ahead and let's copy this formula down so we get the 2 weeks. Let's get the week numbers out first. So there's the weeks that we are looking at, 7, 6. What did I just do? I know what I just did. Yeah, I accidentally had Excel show formulas. That was bad. Right, so let's try that again. Put that to split out the week numbers. It already split out the week numbers. Those are the 4 weeks that we are looking for. So I'm going to take this formula here to find out the team score. So this is going to be Team 1. So that is going to be locking here, locking the column. The week number is going to be there. So when I copy and paste over 1, 2, 3, 4, those are the 4 scores that we get. Add them together, and that is the score for Team 1. Team 1 score. I'm going to put that there just like that. Now let me come over and let me do the same thing for Team 2. So let me copy this, paste it here in this cell. Going to change the team from column G. I believe I just moved it to column H. Yep, that should do it there for that team. 1, 2, 3, 4 over there to get the 4 weeks. So you see if I go in the formula, see this red square is on week 7, then week 6, then week 1, then week 5. We'll do the same thing, sum those together. We'll call this Team 2 score, make that bold. So now let's just put all the answer together. The first part of the answer is which team won. Well, the team that won is the one that got the highest score, right? So if this score is higher than this score, then it must be Team 1, otherwise it must be Team 2. So there we go. We got Team 1 as the first part of our answer. That's what we're looking for. We're going to add a dash in there because that's what they want. And then finally, the difference of the fantasy points. Once again, that's just the absolute difference. So absolute value of the difference between this score and that score. There we go. Team 1, 2,570 points. Let me just copy these calculations, move them all the way down here, just like that. And that is how you solve level 7. Let's go on up and take a look at the bonuses. Bonus 1, if you convert the player codes in the weekly details tab to numbers, what is the largest number? Fortunately, there's a single formula that we can do to find this. Let's go ahead and do max of all of these codes, but these codes are currently as text. So let's multiply them by 1 to turn them into numbers. This will turn out the largest number. We get 977732. Bonus 2, in the Players tab, how many schools have only one player? Well, let's go ahead. What tab did they say? In the Player Details tab. I mean, they're the same now, but we'll go with it. So how many of these schools have one player? I like to use the group by function to find this out. So for my values of the group by function, it's going to be the school names here. And to find this out, I'm going to go ahead and group by. The row fields are going to be the labels I'm going to use, which is those schools. I'm going to count the schools, so that's the value I'm going to do the math for. So that's actually going to be the same. The function is going to be count A, because count in Excel counts numbers. We're counting words here, right? And then the sort order is going to be a simple 2. This 2 references the value columns. Like if I go ahead and enter, that references these columns right here. And the fact that I left it as positive is going to do it in ascending order from smallest to largest. So seeing that, I can actually highlight all of these and see how many of these ones I have. On my status bar, I see I've got 24 ones, and so that's what I'm going to paste in for this question. Bonus 3, what is the most fantasy points scored by any player in any week number? Well, just like we use the max function to find bonus 1, we can use the max function to find bonus 3. The good news is because this is already a number, we don't need to multiply them by 1. Bonus 4, what is the most total fantasy points scored across both teams, so the sum of the score of both teams in a game in level 7? All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do this in 2 steps. First, I'm going to HStack. HStack provides a horizontal stack of numbers together. So I'm going to stack these scores from team 1 next to these scores from team 2. So now I get a 2 by 20 array that does exactly that. Then I'm going to do a by row function, and this by row says for each row, do something. And in this case, I'm going to sum the numbers together. And so there you go, you get the sum of the numbers in each row. And because we want, what is it, the most scored across both teams, once again, that's a nice max function that then I can use to find the answer to that. Finally, bonus 5, and this one's the trickiest one. Who is the winner in a 9-week format that begins with the original 64 players and eliminates the 7 players with the lowest fantasy points each week, dropping to 57 in week 2, 50 in week 3, and continuing until 1 remains? If I'm going to do this on a separate sheet, because this for me was quite a complicated calculation. And to do this, I'm going to use the pivot by function. So if you remember pivot tables, you got your rows, you got your columns, and all the information in between. So I'm going to use a pivot by function to do basically the same thing. My row fields are going to be the players' names. So I want every row to be a single player on this sheet. The column fields are going to be the week numbers. So that way I can see what they scored in week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, and so on. And then finally, for the values of what goes inside the table, we're looking at fantasy scores, right? So I'll put fantasy scores as my values, and my function is going to be sum. Now, there's only going to be 1 score per player per week, so that should return the exact score that comes up in this table. I'm also going to do a couple more few things. I'm going to take the row total depth, which means what totals do I want to see? I don't want to see any row totals. I don't want to see any column totals. That's just going to add extra information that I'm really not going to use. So there you go. This brings out a table of all the players, all the weeks they played, all the fantasy points that they scored in each week. So we're going to do an event where 7 players get eliminated every week, right? So let's go ahead and bring out these player names down here. And what I want to do then is, actually, let me just create a row. So week 1, we're going to have 64 scores. Week 2, we're going to take 7 away from that, and we're going to continue all the way doing that until after this week. This is week 9, where we should be left with 1 score. Right, so let's first bring out all 64 player scores from this week. We're going to do that just like that, but we're going to take out the players who may not have made it to the next round. So we're going to take this score times, is this score larger or equal to the 57th score? So to do that, I am going to bring out, are these values greater than or equal to? The large function will allow me to identify that 57th score. So let me bring out this range again. And for my K value, which is the 57th, I'm going to bring that out just like that. So just again, this is a true or false. This is a Boolean statement. You can see I'm getting trues and falses. Excel's going to treat this as ones or zeros. So if they do not meet that criteria, it's actually going to return back as 0, right? And so there we go. There we go. And we can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players eliminated. They came back with a score of 0. Now I'm going to do this again, but this time I'm going to do it a little bit differently in that I'm going to take these scores and then I'm also going to multiply another condition. Are these scores greater than 0? Because if they are greater than 0, then that's great. That means they're still in. If they're not greater than 0, I don't want to consider them anymore. Just take their scores down to 0 there. And so you see what it does then is that these 3 players are still at 0. This player is still at 0. These players are still at 0. But then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh boy. Did my math not do that properly? That should be 7, 9. Oh boy. Let's take a look at that again. Oh, I think I know why. So, yeah, no, because I need to consider that condition also for the calculation. So let me start fresh and let me do, let's do this in a let statement. I'm going to take this a little bit longer. So let's let valid scores be the scores they got for this round times the past score is greater than 0, right? So now we know if it's a valid score. And then what I want to do with valid scores is, let me just think here. Let's bring out those valid scores, but then also multiply them by a conditional, meaning valid scores are greater than or equal to the 50th valid score there. Now let's see how that changes things. Let me just check to see if I have 7 students eliminated in this round. 1, 2, nope, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for. So the 7 were eliminated. The other 7 were already eliminated in the previous round. So if I take this and I paste it forward again, let's do another check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Did I miss one? Yes, 7 right there. That one was hiding. But yeah, we get the same thing. We get 7 students that are being eliminated. The ones who previously were eliminated are still not counting as we move on. So I'm feeling more comfortable with this formula now, the way that it is. Let me go ahead and copy it all the way across. And let's see which student still has a score at the end. At this point, all the students except for 1 should be eliminated, which is the case. And I see that Dan Ottesen has not been eliminated. I am going to put him as my answer for bonus 5, and that is how you solve this case. A very fun case. I hope you learned something from this video. I hope you enjoyed the case, and I really hope to see you for the next challenge.